Thanks, Ricardo. Appreciate the comments. So I'll make another brief introduction. I first met Rich Davey when he was a young lawyer, and I was a younger person than I am now. Rich was serving as general counsel for the company that at the time operated the Massachusetts commuter rail system. And I got to know Rich then as a smart, pretty skillful lawyer, good negotiator, someone who knew the law, someone who was able to find solutions with the person on the other side of the table. And I can't say that I knew then what his career would be like, but I can tell you that I did observe a person who had talent and interpersonal skills in abundance. And I think my initial observations have proven true. As general manager of Boston's MBTA, which may be one of the most difficult jobs in America today, but has been historically that. And later as Massachusetts Secretary of Transportation, Rich left a very strong legacy of achievement and performance. And in particular, he gets credit for doing something that I tried to do when I was Transportation Secretary and failed at doing, which was getting the legislature to agree to raising the gas tax. No mean feat in any state environment, but particularly in Massachusetts. It was an important way to help raise sufficient revenue to keep advancing the state's transportation program. That was a really big deal in Massachusetts. Rich deserves a lot of credit for making it happen. And it's the only time since Mike Dukakis was governor of Massachusetts since that the gas tax was raised in Massachusetts. As president of New York City Transit now, Rich has the opportunity to manage the country's largest, perhaps the most challenging public transportation system, carrying over 7 million people every day. And he's receiving high marks for the way he's managing it. And I think the complexity of the system would be daunting for anyone. Rich has certainly proven that he can master that complexity. So he's done a lot more in his career, but I wanted to focus on the transportation and transit components because they're particularly relevant today. And it's an honor. Well, first of all, I'll say, Rich, it's a pleasure to see you again. And it's an honor to introduce you and welcome you to make our first keynote address. Rich Davey.
Well, thanks, Jim, for the very generous introduction. And maybe lesson one for folks on the phone. As you think about your career and where you are, you should ask yourselves two questions. Who is my kitchen cabinet and whose kitchen cabinet am I in? And I'm really blessed to have Jim as part of my kitchen cabinet throughout my career. And so as a young lawyer learning, although across the table, learning a lot of those interpersonal skills and those skills to get to yes. Jim was a master at that. And then I also say, too, that while there were a lot of things I didn't get done as transportation secretary, I think in these jobs, transportation is all about building upon your predecessors and hoping whatever organization you work at, you leave it in a little better place for those that succeed you to move forward. So Jim, thank you. Well, good morning. Delighted to be with you all. Happy Marathon Day and happy Patriots Day. With forgiveness to any of our British colleagues on the phone. This is the one day a year we get to celebrate a victory many, many years ago in Boston at your expense. Sorry. Dwayne, thank you for the introduction and for your partnership. Obviously, you continue to do a lot here in New York City and with us at MTA. MIT, TDC, Ricardo, good to see you, and a delight to meet you all. So I'm going to spend a few minutes. I think I have a PowerPoint. I don't know if Ricardo or Moji or Tiffany, you can call it up. If not, I can call it up. You tell me. But what I wanted to talk a little bit about was sort of innovation, both what we're doing to innovate at New York City Transit. That is both sort of maybe technology based, but I think Jim said it best earlier around inclusion and equity. Inclusion and equity requires, I think, transportation agencies, government agencies, to not only think about technology, but to think about where their customers are and to meet their customers where they are. And I think that's something that given the, the real diversity, and I mean that in every sense of the word, diversity of our customers here in New York City. We've really been thoughtful and strategic about all that we're bringing to bear to make sure that innovation is inclusive. But maybe just taking a step back and just giving you a little summation of sort of who we are. I don't know if the slide presentation was up and I lost it. So there we go. So maybe if you go to the next slide. As Jim said, New York City Transit is the largest transit system in North America. Prior to COVID, we were over 7 million subway, bus, and paratransit customers every day. Today, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays in particular, we're about 6 million, both paid and unpaid, which I can talk about in a minute. We have an enormous workforce, 47,000 employees that move this system. To give you a sense, at the MBTA, the workforce size is about, I think, 6,000. Like really no other place in the U.S., while transit's important in places like San Francisco and Boston and D.C. as an example, really transit is the lifeblood of New York City. You cannot imagine the city at all functioning without a functioning public transit system. My boss, Jano Lieber, often says it's like air and water for a New Yorker. Public transit is as important. Next slide. So I started about 2 years ago here in the job, actually 2 years ago in about 2 weeks. And, one thing I think you will not find lacking in public transportation is data and things that we measure. Mean distance between failure and customer journey time. And you just go down the list. I think our book is like 200 pages that we publish on a monthly basis to the public. Can be overwhelming. And so what I try to do is actually reorient the organization to say, what is the most important metric that we need to build, our sort of plan around? And that was customer satisfaction. How many of our customers are satisfied or very satisfied with our service? And then you ask the questions, well, why not? What could we do better? What would get you to use our system more? What do you like? What should we continue to do? And it's sort of a classic question, but I think one I have seen not often sort of asked deeply in public services, but specifically in public transportation. And so, as you can see, we started asking this question. We do it on a monthly basis. We get about 3,000 or 4,000 customers per mode to respond. Then every 6 months, we do a deep dive and get about 100,000 or more New Yorkers to respond, so we can get by route, by station, data in detail, and then craft our plans and approach around that. And so, right now our goal is to get to 70% customer satisfaction this year, which would be a high watermark for New York City Transit. It's bounced around, as you can see, a little bit, but on subway and paratransit, consistently rising. Paratransit, we're at this point at 80%, which I'll talk about in a minute. And subway has been bouncy a bit because of safety, which we can talk about. And then bus service, we've very much been focused on service out on our roads, clearly. But we've seen actually an improvement since that December Pulse survey, up in the mid-60s now. So that is our North Star. And so as a result, next slide, what we asked our customers was, okay, how can we improve your satisfaction? And really, it was captured in 3 words. And when you're trying to manage a large organization, 47,000 people, an enormous media market, millions of customers, boiling things down to its essence is super important. And that's what we did. What we heard from our customers and our employees was if we could provide a service that was faster, cleaner, and safer. Those 3 things, faster, cleaner, safer, then our customers' satisfaction would improve. And so, we can talk about what all that means, but faster, more frequent, and reliable service, clearly, cleaner stations and vehicles, the environment that our customers are utilizing, and then a safer environment for our customers and staff. Coming out of COVID, a lot of urban systems have had challenges around homelessness, crime less so, actually. I think that gets a disproportionate focus, to be honest. But mental health challenges is, I think, one that's common. Certainly from my peers that I talk to, were folks who have, acute mental health issues find themselves sheltering or otherwise in our systems, and that leads to a feeling of a lack of safety for our customers. So faster, cleaner, and safer are the real three core principles. And so next slide. And so as a result, innovation needs to support one of those three. I've been very, very sort of focused with our team to say, if what we're doing doesn't support a faster, cleaner, or safer service, should we be doing it at all? And as we talk about innovation, if innovation needs to support one of those three items of our sort of strategic operating plan, and the reality is it is, and innovation really is focusing. So we go to paratransit, for example. We've been piloting now. We're in a phase 2 of an on-demand service for our paratransit customers that gives them spontaneity and better mobility options. Just taking a step back, we have about 37,000 paratransit customers every day, 37,000. So we would be, just the paratransit system alone would be like the size of a medium-sized bus service anywhere else in the United States. This is just our paratransit customers. And so we have been leveraging technology big time. So not only for scheduling and booking processes, so our ridership is now at a historic high, even prior to COVID. As I said, our customer satisfaction is 80%. But we've been really using data to leverage and understand for the customers who are in this on-demand e-hail pilot to understand what customer behavior is, and to see if we can scale it beyond the pilot we have, which is about 3,000 or so customers now. Right now, we have both a trip cap and a dollar cap, if you will, per ride in 2 different ways. And we've been watching how customers are behaving to see if we can improve upon that and stay and remain within our budget. So some really exciting stuff there. Next slide. On bus service. Now, this should be a video. I don't know if we can cue it up, and if it doesn't work, that's unfortunate, but that's okay. We have almost 2 million bus customers in New York City. Itself would be, the 3rd largest transit system in America, just our bus network. And the curb management, I would say, is a huge challenge in New York for a bunch of reasons. And as a result of that, those challenges, a lot of our buses, either in bus lanes or just getting around the city, are incredibly hampered. We are back to pre-traffic and pre-COVID traffic volumes within the city of New York. And what we've seen is a continued drop in the overall speed of our buses. And so one thing that we are launching next month, given some powers the legislature gave us, is to expand our ability to ticket cars that are parked in bus stops, bike lanes, by the way, double parked in the way of a bus, or using a bus lane. And we've been piloting that already just with bus lanes. And we've seen some really good improvements, not only in speed, as you can see here. Bus speeds in lanes that are enforced actually improved by about 30% in New York. We see a reduction in about 20% of collisions. And a New Yorker, once they get a ticket, are very unlikely to get a second ticket, which is good news. We only have an 8% recidivism rate. And so we're expanding this, as I said, next month. We're very excited about that, because those routes where we've had successful piloting implementation, we've seen significant improvements for our bus customers. I mean, this is a pet peeve of mine. I was on social media ticketing cars and bus lanes. It drives me absolutely bananas when I see cars, my own, people's cars, any kind of cars parked in bus lanes that impede the ability for our customers to get around. So we're looking forward to that and expect to see some important dividends later this year. Next slide. You're going to talk about sort of I think the future of bus operations a little later as well. So not only is it about getting, please post questions. Not only is it about getting around, but it's also about electrifying or otherwise getting to a zero emissions fleet. So we have a pretty ambitious goal over the next decade or so to convert our 6,000 buses to zero emissions, which also means not only buying new vehicles, but it also means converting our 26 depots to allow for charging, or in one instance, we will be piloting hydrogen at our Gun Hill depot in the Bronx. And so there's massive infrastructure investment required. Obviously, we're coaching up and skilling up our employees as well. But also, ensuring that we'll be able to launch this. We're very excited about this, and actually in about an hour, I'll be announcing the first electric paratransit vehicle will be going to service later this week. And so we're converting our paratransit fleet as well to zero emission. So a big push for us, and one where we're working closely with the industry and others to move this forward. Next slide. One of the things that Dwayne mentioned earlier that in the past, folks were able to visit the Coney Island shop, which is the largest rail yard and shop in the system. That's the top picture, actually, is a picture of Coney Island. But really maintaining our rolling stock and core infrastructure. I think one, sort of focus, I know Jim has had this too, and maybe frustration that we've had in other roles, is there often is very much a focus on expansion, which is good. Green Line extension to Somerville, which is a huge project. 2nd Avenue subway here up to 125th Street, something that's been promised for decades. That's going to happen. And those projects tend to get the spotlight, but there are massive, massive sort of behind the scenes projects that have to occur with the same kind of fervor and excitement and support as those expansion projects, right? And obviously the T, for several years, I think struggled through, and the new general manager, Phil Ang, is doing, I think, yeoman's work to move forward with many of their speed restrictions, but that was sort of years of lack of maintenance. Here we have the Summer of Hell back in 2017, where subway service was just terrible because there had been a lack of investment in the core infrastructure for a long time. And so not only is it investing, but it's smart investment. I think one thing that the transit system or the transit industry has done a poor job of, in my experience, is the lack of data, of the lack of building out a predictive maintenance model, and something that we are piloting with right now using Clever Devices and another company to use the telematics off of bus to predict a failure of a bus before it fails in service. And we're looking for the same for our rolling stock and our infrastructure as well. So there are smart bolts, for example, you can use and track infrastructure that observes vibrations, for example, in the track structure. We send out geometry cars. But are there other methods to look at data and see if we can predict failure before it occurs? That's a big piece of sort of our strategy here, and I think one that other systems in the U.S. and globally should be looking at. Next slide. We've also debuted new subway car. And so, we put, there's nothing like a new subway car to get customers excited. And we put our new R211s in starting late last year with wider doors, improved passenger flow, better lighting, signage, dynamic signage, for example, for our maps, and then cameras on board if there are any particular issues, and obviously plenty of space for our customers who are in mobility devices, our customers who are disabled. And then we did for the first time introduce open gangway cars in the United States. We have two 10-car trains running right now on our C line, and to great customer excitement. So that's key. And by the way, we're taking cars out of service that are 52 years old. And so, as you can imagine, the reliability on the A and C line, just by putting new rolling stock in service, has increased dramatically. Next slide. Now, New York, I think, has embraced the turnstile for fare evasion. It's something we've had in service for many, many years, and we've been sort of slow to adopt these sort of new fare gates. But fare evasion has been a significant issue for us across MTA. So not only at New York City Transit, but the two railroads and bridges and tunnels as well. And the lack of that, that fare evasion really hurts our ability to increase service, which is something that we've been very focused on the bus and subway side. And so we're hardening our fare control areas. We're modifying turnstiles. We actually have observed, students here in New York get a free Metro card and get 3 free rides a day. But we observe students, even with free cards, aren't using or swiping our system, bizarrely. And so we're looking at a new gamification pilot to get students to swipe, as opposed to going through our emergency gates or just sort of I think what it does is frustrate other customers when they see students who, again, have probably already paid through a prepaid Metro card, but see them, quote, evading the fare. And so we also want to encourage sort of the next generation, once they are no longer students, to also pay their fare in the future. So we're looking at that. And as mentioned too, on the equity and the inclusion side, one thing that I know Boston's starting to experiment with, but we've been doing now for a few years in partnership with the city of New York, is having what we call a fair fares program. So allowing customers at a certain income threshold to apply for a reduced fare, which is half price. So rather than paying $2.90, which is our base fare here, $1.45, they could qualify for that. And so we've been pushing pretty hard to ensure that our customers as well can apply for that. Next slide. And we're piloting technologies with the Transit Tech Lab. So the Transit Tech Lab was a group that was founded within the Partnership for New York City. So it's a business group, a lot like the Chamber in Boston, for example, the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. And within that group, every year we put out a pilot challenge with our peers here, and so the Port Authority, for example, on questions that we have or improvements that we need to do where we can pilot quickly with the private sector on a number of technologies. And so this year we're very focused on things that will improve the customer's experience, make our system more resilient, and as I mentioned earlier, maximize city curb space. So for example, Remix is a company we've worked with. They've been instrumental in helping us with our bus network redesigns. We've been redesigning our bus networks across the 5 boroughs over the last few years, some bus routes still follow the old trolley lines from the 1930s and 40s, if you can believe that. And so Remix has helped us there. And then the Essential Connector app, this was in particular during the pandemic when we were able to stand up relatively quickly an app that helped essential workers get around the system when we had subway service closed overnight. We are a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week system. But that was an important part of getting essential workers to work during those difficult days of the pandemic. Next slide. On safety, we're also deploying, we have about 15,000 cameras in our system, and we're deploying cameras. You can see one here on the new, one of our new R211 trains. But it's, it's to show that, actually, it's not one of our R211 trains. This was retrofitted, this car. But it gives us real-time information on what's happening in cars. We're also piloting or about to pilot e-mirrors in our buses. So rather than having mirrors that are out, out sort of protruding from the bus, by the way, those contribute about 20% of our collisions, those mirrors, bringing the e-mirrors in and allowing our bus operators a safer ride. We'll be testing that soon. And then we're looking at things like, in the future, potentially AI on top of our camera system, not to track individuals, but what we're particularly interested in is, as I mentioned, mental health is a big issue. And so the AI systems could potentially, for example, detect if a person is maybe acting erratically on a station platform, several trains go by, the person actually doesn't get on a train, and, dispatching appropriate help, clinicians, for example, before, maybe tragedy occurs. So we're looking at that as another way to improve our safety. Next slide. And accessibility has been another piece. So Navalens is another company that we've been working with. And so having these sort of, devices available, or at least you can see here, the boss is pointing to one of the Navalens codes. It allows for customers who are either blind or have low eyesight to have an audible description of where they are in a station, for example, and where the exits are. We're also putting up real-time elevator and escalator information, although those are at an all-time high, making sure for our customers, we're still woefully under accessible, if you will, in the subway system. About 150 of our 472 stations are accessible. We're making a big investment there, but that's going to take a long time. So making sure that our customers are aware of when stations might have an elevator that's out of service is critically important. Next slide. But taking a step back, what I've also learned in these jobs is innovation is not just about sort of technology. It's about sort of re-looking at your analog, right? What are you doing that maybe you've been doing for a long time, you should stop doing, or that you can improve and enhance upon? And so a few things we've done is point to weekend service hours. So when I got here, what I saw was our weekend service, even though that relatively speaking, the ridership was growing faster than our weekday service, our weekend service was lagging, in part because we do a lot of construction and a lot of maintenance work on the weekends. But we didn't have a particular person coordinating with the construction group and subways and buses to ensure that we had as little impact on our customers as possible. I think the mantra was, let's get work done. And secondarily was, let's put good service out. We flipped that on its head and said, no, no, no. We need to make sure that the service we're offering is compelling for our customers on the weekends. And yes, we want to get our work done safely. We've also enhanced the station agent. We've had these token collectors for decades in our service and our system. We no longer do cash transactions. We haven't sold a token here in years. And so pulling those agents out of the booth and asking them to provide hands-on customer service, getting our customers to understand, this is a very confusing system, particularly for those who might not use it that often. And so these agents coming out of the booth and providing service has been key. We've also stood up what we call scout teams, and mentioned earlier, mental health is a big issue. So these are clinicians who are paired with police officers who go into our system and help folks who might have an acute mental health issue and get them to the right services. And we've seen a pretty impressive uptick of individuals who are getting the right kinds of services now, as opposed to in the past where they might be arrested and then, as they said, maybe treated or streeted, not helpful. And then protecting our frontline employees as well with physical enhancements. The barrier there, as you can see, for our bus operator. So last slide, and then happy to take questions. And so, as I said, innovation really needs to be measured with our core metrics. And, every decision we make here is data driven. I have a phrase that I use often, which is manage by evidence, not by anecdote. And I think often in this business, we can chase, a customer complaint here and there, or, someone, the media or a politician or someone who has a particular complaint, but not actually say, is this a trend, or what are the sort of concerns of our customers? And, as I said, no data point is more critical than our customer satisfaction. So I know that the top 3 concerns for our customers in subways right now, in order, are emotionally disturbed individuals, homelessness, and crime. And I know on buses that the top 3 issues for our customers are wait times, journey times, and then people paying their fare. And so we're designing, as a result, our innovations, both the technology and the analog, around addressing those issues for our customers. So, at this point, happy to take questions, but I'd be remiss to say too that for folks here on the line, if you're interested, in working for MTA or New York City Transit, or frankly any transit agency for that matter, this is an industry that needs talent. It needs folks who have new ideas, whose customer perspective is different than mine, and can help us continue to drive our organizations. And so don't be shy in reaching out to me or the MBTA or the WMATA for that matter, et cetera, because we need new ideas, and we need young folks to get into this business and help us drive some change. So with that, Ricardo, Jim, happy to take questions.
Yeah, thank you for the insightful presentation, Richard. It's really great to see all the innovation and efforts towards improving the New York City transit system to improve customer satisfaction, as you said, by advancing a faster, cleaner, and safer system. We had a few questions come in, and I guess I'll start with just one. Steve still asked a question regarding the benefits of congestion pricing on the transit system, if you can provide comments on some of the benefits that might come from that.
Sure. Yeah. So I was remiss in maybe not mentioning that. So our board, so congestion pricing quickly, New York City, we're on the cusp of implementing it, we think as soon as June. but it's been a 5-year journey, maybe longer. Legislature here in New York passed a bill which authorized congestion pricing in 2019. Let's just say the previous White House sat on that for a couple of years. And when the Biden administration came in, we were able to progress it through the public comment process through federal highways. So fast forward, we've had thousands of public comments, thousands of hundreds of hearings, I should say. And, we're on the cusp of implementing congestion pricing, basically what we call to the central business district. So in Manhattan, 59th Street and south down to the Battery, where we're located. And it will, charge a fee for cars that are coming into the central business district, $15 during peak time, $3.75, I think, off peak time. There are some other changes depending on the vehicle class and size. And it's designed to really do, 3 things. One is to improve the air quality in a relatively small and dense, congested area, Lower Manhattan. 2 is to improve traffic. As I mentioned, we're back to pre-traffic levels here. And so that means slower buses and slower ambulances and fire trucks for that matter. Higher pedestrian challenges, even though the city's done a good job of making street design changes that improve pedestrian safety. And 3 is raise revenue to invest in transit and the capital plan in particular. So none of the dollars will go to the operations. They'll go to subsidize or allow us to raise debt to implement a pretty significant capital plan we have. This current capital plan we're in is a 5-year, $55 billion capital plan, to give you a sense of the size of what we need to do. I mean, I live in Hell's Kitchen, really close to the Lincoln Tunnel. I've only been there a couple of years, but I talked to my neighbors who've been there for decades, and they are thrilled because they've been choked literally and figuratively by traffic in that neighborhood for a generation or more, given all the traffic that occurs. And some folks are concerned and say, well, we're charging drivers, or we shouldn't be charging folks. 90% of those folks who commute into the central business district every day come by transit. So 90% of folks are already using public transit. There's a very small percentage of folks who are driving their cars into the central business district. So I'm excited. Are we going to get it 100% right? I doubt it. And the MTA board will be able to sort of tweak the payments and charges over time, no doubt. They'll keep an eye on that. But the gantries are up, and there are 2 lawsuits. There are multiple lawsuits, but they've been consolidated, one in New Jersey and one in New York. But we'll be ready to go in June. And I think this experiment's going to work, and I would be shocked if we were the only city in the U.S. to have congestion pricing in place in 5 or 10 years.
That's great. Yeah. And Jim Eloise asked a question on whether you're concerned about the ability to procure sufficient zero-emission buses given the capacity limitations of the manufacturers who can meet the Buy America test. And have you considered the possibility of any joint procurements with other systems like Boston or Philadelphia?
Yeah, so Jim, I'm very concerned. I was vice chair of a task force that APTA put together on this very question, and we gave our recommendations to an old friend, Samantha Silverberg, and the White House just at the end of February. A couple things there. I think one is we looked at what the industry could control, the buyers, and around some terms and conditions, and some suggestions about maybe some, I'd say, more appropriate risk sharing. I think in this business, and that was probably one of the debates you and I had 20 years ago about risk sharing between the private and public sector. I think often the public sector probably pushes too much risk onto the private sector, which just ultimately costs you more money because the private sector will build that into their costs. So we looked at that question. And then the sort of second set of recommendations haven't been acted on yet. I think they're a little more long-term and frankly, a little more probably controversial. And that, I have a very strong opinion that because the OEMs here in the United States, there were 10, maybe 15 years ago. Today, there are sort of 2. New Flyer is one of the sponsors and one of our major suppliers, and they've been a great supplier, but they too, had some challenges during COVID. But we want a robust competitive system. But Buy America, as you know, I think was born out of good intended policy, which was to create American manufacturing jobs. But what it's done is, I think, prevented some very qualified companies from outside the United States from making investments in the United States, building a manufacturing base, and then being able to compete. And so, I've been a strong proponent of a bridge to Buy America, so allowing other companies, some short window or runway to set up manufacturing facilities in the United States to make that investment and then be able to see that there would be a return. More to come, I would say, on that. But there is a challenge, right? I mean, we are not the only. We are one of many transit systems in the U.S. On the question of looking at joint procurements, we have right now, we're actually doing a process with a few of the largest systems, including Boston, looking at specification unification. So a lot of systems will, spec out their own particular bus. And, at the end of New Flyer, I think, told us they have 98 shades of white paint. Now, I had 16 Crayola crayons when I was a kid, so I only thought there were 16 colors. I didn't know there were 98 shades of white. But that just gives you a sense for how much bespokeness, is out in the system. And so we're working with the T and SEPTA, WMATA to look at, are there some specifications that we can agree to, some unified specifications to try to reduce the overall, engineering and unit costs. The last thing I would say too is what's a little worrisome is that as we go to battery technology in particular, it's more expensive. And for the manufacturers, I think, they had a compelling argument to say that, they have to outlay more cash. And so their cash flow is a potential issue. So there are challenges we need to work through that are both on the sort of cash side for the OEMs, but also, in the future, having a robust industry that is competitive.
Got it. It seems like we have about maybe a few minutes or 1 minute left, but I guess one last question from Kevin Zhang is, do you ride the subway? And I think that's a yes. If so, what are the major issues that you yourself see with the system?
So Tiffany, I haven't owned a car since 2010. And I can't take credit for it. My wife for Christmas bought me a Zip card membership, and it was in my stocking. And I said, well, this is nice. Why did I get a Zip card membership? She said, well, I donated our car 2 weeks ago to the Home for Little Wanderers in Boston. Now, it should give you a sense that I had no idea the car was missing for 2 weeks. But no, I take the subway. I took this morning. I live on the 7 line, and this morning I mixed it up. I took the M42 bus over to Times Square and took the number 2 down to South Ferry. There are a lot of challenges, right? I think that, but there's also a lot of good, right? I mean, the beauty about the subway system here, I would say in New York, is that all walks of life use the system. Everyone has in New York, I think everyone has a bad subway story and a good subway story. I think that is sort of, it's a binding civic place. Not unlike Boston, although it's different here because of the size. I'll finally say this. I'll finish with a story. When I became general manager back, 14 years ago now, my mother gave me a clock with the quote on it that said, "You're only as good as your last rush hour." So that's like my mother judging me twice a day. Forget about the public. But what I love about transportation, maybe this is what you all love about it too, is that, it is the day-to-day. Like, there are people out there right now relying exactly on our service. And yet you get to also imagine, as you are today, right, the future of mobility. What should mobility look like in 10, 15, or 20 years, right? And Jim and I have had, some scars about sort of putting those out there, and maybe during our time not getting some of those successes done. But perhaps it's up to this group or this generation to sort of maybe challenge some of those hypotheses we put out, and if they're proven correct, to to push and implement them. So that's what I love about transportation. It is the here and now. It is, people relying on you today, but you also get to envision and imagine what the future looks like, whether that's in a project or policy or, an innovation. So
yeah, that's definitely exciting and great, and maybe something that the attendees here and also us can think about, I guess, as the future generation of talent in transportation. So I'll pass it off to Jim to do any closing remarks.
Well, Rich, thanks again for doing this. I think we were informed and enlightened by this presentation. I'm very interested in also the Q&A. I think we're all generally aligned in your thinking, particularly about the challenges that transit agencies are facing when we're trying to decarbonize the bus system. So thank you for this. Good luck as you continue in this important work. And next time you're in Boston, come to MIT and look us up.
MIT is a stone's throw from our condo that we still own. So yes, I will definitely do that. Thanks, Jim.
All
Dwayne,
right,
thank you.
thanks.
Thanks all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Take care of yourself, Mr. Davey.
Perfect. I think we have all panelists here. Awad, I think we